Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk Rosalinda Indian Hawthorne. This is Raphiolepis indica Rosalinda, or Rosalinda Indian Hawthorne. This is a little different than most of the Indian hawthorns that get sold in horticulture. Most of them are little dwarfs that get 2 or 3 feet in height, something like that. This is a very vigorous growing evergreen shrub with large, shiny, lustrous leaves, wonderfully fragrant scented flowers, and an incredible vigorous growth habit. So again, this is not your typical dwarf Indian hawthorn. Rosalinda can reach 12 to 15 feet in height, something like that, maybe 10 feet in width. Typically has a mounding habit. This one's actually been tree formed. It'll be a little hard to see because there's some bulbs growing down below it, but it's actually been limbed up into a small tree. The leaves are enormous on this in comparison to dwarf Indian hawthorns, probably 3-4 times as big. Thick, lustrous leaves, great looking foliage. New growth on it is this maroon color, just starting to put on some new growth now. We've shot this toward the end of the flowering, so we've missed peak flowering as we're filming, but we're also seeing how the new growth is coming out on it. The flowers appear in clusters about softball size. Really nice medium pink flowers, incredibly fragrant, and it's really the perfect fragrance. I can smell it now, in the afternoon sunlight hitting it a little bit. Great fragrance, not overwhelming, just kind of a perfect fragrance. Much larger flowers, much larger flower clusters than dwarf Indian hawthorns. We're here in Raleigh, North Carolina, zone 7B. Rosalinda is actually hardy in zone 8 to 10. We're kind of in a asphalt jungle here in the city of Raleigh and lean more toward zone 8. And so it's been fine in our garden. We have covered it a couple times. If you're trying this one in zone 7, during the worst of the winter, you might need to throw a cover over it a couple times to protect this, foliage, which tries to get ahead, and the flowers that try to get ahead in the spring. I'm still not at my frost-free date. It's already got 6 inches of new growth on it. It's a very vigorous, very vigorous grower. This is definitely a full sun plant. Maybe partial shade in the late afternoon is okay, but you definitely want to get morning sun on Indian hawthorns to get the foliage dry as quick as possible. They do have some leaf spot issues if the foliage stays wet for a long period of time. So having it out here in an area where the sun hits it first thing in the morning and the air's moving across it prevents any of those problems. And then again, it likes some of that, definitely wants some of that midday sun. And then it would be okay if it went into the shade late in the day, but certainly the first half to 2/3 of the day, you'd want it in the full sun. I think you can see from the backside, you can see the trunk down here on it where it's been limbed up a bit. I'm going to do a little bit of pruning on it during this season to try to thicken this trunk up a bit before I let it get too big. The trunk's a little bit thin on it. So where would you use either a tree-formed Rosalinda or a big doming 12, 15 foot evergreen shrub? Well, that's going to make a great screening plant in zone 8, 9, or 10. Make a great corner foundation plant, great specimen plant. And we just have it out here as a one-of-a-kind, super interesting plant. We've got other bulbs that come up around it, other perennials that come up around it, other flowering shrubs that are around it, and we've just let it be the centerpiece for this bed because it's so showy from its giant lustrous green foliage, its new burgundy foliage, the scented flowers, the whole thing just says specimen plant. So beyond placing it in the full sun, they would like moist, well-drained soil. They're tolerant of lots of different soil types. If you have clay soils, I typically will mound up, most plants a little bit above the original grade just to make sure they're not sitting in water. These are very salt tolerant, so if you have dogs, that's a good thing. Deer like Indian hawthorns, so if you have deer issues, you want to put this up against a house or in a fenced area, something like that, because they will go after Indian hawthorns, especially when they have new growth on them during the spring. This will get pruned after it finishes flowering, and so we'll get lots of new growth. This thing is a very vigorous growing plant. So once it's finished flowering, I'll get as much as 2 and 3 feet of growth on one of these stems. So I'm probably going to wait for some of that growth to occur, and then I'm going to cut it back into a ball, probably right in this range. So right after it finishes flowering, you can prune it. We fertilize our shrubs like once a year. We've got this area well mulched. We keep it kind of evenly moist, but these are extremely drought tolerant. Once Indian hawthorns are established, they're very, very drought tolerant. So not a plant that you're going to have to spend a lot of time worrying about. I'll fertilize it once a year. I'll prune it after it flowers if it needs it. And that's pretty much it. As long as it's getting good air movement and lots of morning sun, that should prevent any kind of foliar disease issues that you're going to have. Again, protect it from the deer. And outside of that, this is a really fantastic, lot of bang for the buck kind of a shrub with the fragrant flowers, the beautiful new foliage, and the incredible shiny green lustrous foliage that it has. But this is Rosalinda Indian Hawthorne. Thanks for watching.